Good morning, my dear students. Today we are continuing with our chapter 2 in history, Socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. Students, in our previous lecture we were studied about the Civil War and the making a socialist society. Now today I will again recall making a socialist society for your better understanding. And a new topic today I will explain you Stalinism and collectivization. So please listen carefully for your better understanding. Now, making a socialist society. During the Civil War, the Bolshevik kept industries and banks nationalized. They permitted peasants to cultivate the land that had been socialized. Bolsheviks were confiscated land to demonstrate what collective work could be. Official assessed how the economy could work and set targets for 5-year periods. On this basis, they made the 5-year plans. The government fixed all prices to promote industrial growth during the first two plans from 1927 to 1932 and 1933 to 1938. Centralized planning led to economic growth. Industrial production increased between 1929 and 1933 by 100% in the case of oil, coal, and steel. New factory cities came into being. However, rapid construction led to poor working conditions. In the city of Magnitogorsk, the construction of the steel plant was achieved in 3 years. Workers live hard lives and the result was 550 stoppages of work in the first year alone. An extended schooling system developed and arrangements were made for factory workers and peasants to enter universities. Crutches were established in the factory for the children of women workers. Cheap public health care was provided. Model living quarters were set up for workers. The effect of all this was uneven, though since government resources were limited. The period of the early planned economy was linked to the disasters of the collectivization of agriculture. By 1927-1928, the towns in Soviet Russia were facing an acute problem of grain supplies. Now, all this process of centralized planning was introduced on the basis they made a 5-year plans. So government fixed all the prices to promote industrial growth during the first two plans. So in this, industrial production increased between 1929 and 1933 by 100% in the case of oil, coal, and steel. Now students, Stalinism and collectivization. Now in this, the period of the early planned economy was linked to the disasters of collectivization of agriculture. By 1927-28, the towns in Soviet Russia were facing an acute problem of grain supplies. The government fixed prices at which grain must be sold, but the peasants refused to sell their grain to government buyers at these prices. Stalin, who headed the party after the death of Lenin, introduced firm emergency measures. He believed that the rich peasants and traders in the countryside were holding stocks in the hope of higher prices. Speculations had to be stopped and supports confiscated. Now, in 1928, party members toured the grain producing area, supervising enforced grain collection and raiding kulaks. Kulaks were the name for well-to-do peasants. As shortage continued, the decision was taken to collectivize farm. It was argued that grain shortages were partly due to the small size of holding. After 1917, the land had been given over to peasants. These small-sized peasant farms could not be modernized. To develop modern farms and run them along industrial line with the machinery, it was necessary to eliminate kulaks, take away lands from peasants and established state-controlled large farms. What followed was Stalin collectivization program. From 1929, the party forced all peasants to cultivate in collective farms, that is known as kulkos. Collective farm is known as kulkos. The bulk of land and implements were transferred to the ownership of collective farms. Peasant works on the land and the kulkos profit was shared. Enraged peasants resisted the authorities and destroyed their livestock. Between 1929 and 1931, the number of cattle fell by one third. Those who resist collectivization were severely punished. Many were deported and exiled as they resisted collectivization. Peasants argued that they were not rich and they were not against socialism. They merely did not want to work in collective farms for a variety of reasons. Stalin government allowed some independent cultivation but treated such cultivators unsympathetically. In spite of in spite of collectivization, production did not increase immediately. In fact, the bad harvests of 1930-33 led to one of the most devastating famine in Soviet history when over 4 million people were died. So here, in short, party forced all peasants to collective in collective farms. The bulk of land and implements were transferred to the ownership of collective farms. Peasants work on land and the kulkos profit was shares. Kulkos means collective farms. Enraged peasants resisted the authorities and destroyed their livestock. Those who resist collectivization were severely punished. Stalin government allowed some independent cultivation but treated such cultivators unsympathetically. Thank you, students.